Today we're looking at injury-free running. There's three things that we can do to improve how we approach our training, how we move when we're running, and how our equipment. So they're just three easy little things we can do today. So first things first is sometimes I see injuries as a result of footwear. So, I mean, if you can imagine, you buy a new pair of trainers, they're really fine, they've got good spring, they've got really good support, and they're got good grip on the soles. So, but as they get older, there's a certain limitation to the miles that any pair of trainers should do. And I've got three pairs here. If I just show you them, so I've got three pairs here. At the far end are my running shoes from last winter. And then I've got my current training shoes in the middle, and I've got my new race shoes at the front in the funky green colour. So if you look at the shoes, you can see how progressively, as the miles are taken up, I mean, these ones are nearly dead. Can you see how these have got this really big fold here? There's a lot of creases in the sole. And you can see that on the foot, you see that is just worn out almost on the treads there. So those shoes really shouldn't be used for any training runs. These shoes have got reasonable grip still. They've got a reasonable shape. They're starting to show signs across here of wear and into the sides of the soles. Can you see these little hairline kind of markings, which are compression damage? And if you compare these two pairs together, they're exactly the same shoe, just different year versions. And they would have the same amount of height at the front, but these are so tired, they've lost their spring in their insole spring, so they kind of lost that bit of their capacity to respring back and reform. And can you see how high the toe box is compared to these ones here? And then if you look and then compare that again to the distance at the front of the new race shoes, you see that's even shorter. And that's similar at the backs as well. So you can see, and can you see progressively how these have got a very flat kind of approach, these have got a slightly indented toe box, and these have got a really destroyed toe box. So think about your runners. They should probably do something like 300 miles, something like that. But sometimes less. I mean, if they're really light shoes or very sort of short base on them, they might do less. But don't run in shoes that are really broken down, and that's a really good way of saving yourself, with grip and with the capacity to the shoes to absorb forces as you're running. Okay, second thing we're going to look at is injuries. Now, I've got a little bit on here on my iPad. So can you see that 80% of injuries that I see and that have been recorded from runners all around the world are to do with a training error. Now, what we like to think about is the 10% rule. So if you think about how if you increase your training by more than 10%, that's likely to cause in any one step. So that could be speed, that could be distance, that could be load. That has been shown to be responsible for up to 80% of injuries. So, try and keep your progress through your training at a sensible level, and try and, stick to the same distance but go quicker, or stick to 10% more distance but go a bit steady, and try and build up your training in different ways. So maybe fast one run, short, maybe long, slower, and then just try and build up slowly and build, good form. Now, the third thing we're going to look at is going to be how we land on the ground. Now, if you have a really long stride, the likelihood is you're going to be hitting your ground heavily with your heel, and then can you see there's like a line of force coming up from my ankle up to my hip, and it's kind of all really rigid structures. So could hurt the knee, could hurt the ankle, could hurt the hip. But also it means that I'm now going to have to push myself. I've got this foot's off the ground in this part of the stride. So I'm having to actually pull myself forwards because the foot's in front of me. So rather I try to think about doing a more mid-foot stride. So I'm actually going to land with my foot underneath my body. I'm going to land more mid-foot. Can you see how the structures are a bit more bent and they've got a certain amount of softness? I can absorb forces here with the foot, knee and hip. But more importantly, my momentum takes me forwards, and then I'm into my push stride, which means I can use my back of my legs, my hip and my glutes. So that's the key. Now, how do we get to that point is the question. The question is then about how do we reduce that overstride and get to a more midfoot position without really having to think about it. And one of the things I like to use is cadence, or cadence, is about how fast your feet hit the ground. And there's like an optimal range, somewhere between about 160 and about 180. Will depend on leg length. But there's a couple of really good applications. There's a free app called Soundbender, which has got a metronome function. And if we set that up, I've got it on my iPad. So I use a free app called from Soundbender, which is called Metronome, and it looks a bit like this. So if you can see here, you've got like a wheel that you can dial in different paces, different rhythms, and you can have different sounds. And then if you just press the play button, you get a flashing light and you get like a tick, 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 tick. And that's, about my foot speed. Now, if I've got a very short time between each stride, I can only ever extend my legs so far in front of me, so I tend to land more midfoot, and what that does is that maintains my momentum, shorter time on the ground, less effort, and you get more speed for, it's more for less. So it's also a win in terms of speed, it's a win in terms of potential injury prevention, and more comfortable running, which is win-win-win. The other thing we can use is Pilates breathing exercise to help with that cadence. So if you think about the 100, where we inhale and exhale for counts of 5. So tap, 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 tap. It's very like the metronome. And then we can maybe slow it down a little bit, make it a count of 4. Inhale for 4 steps, and then exhale for 4 steps. You're going to get a completely even rhythm through your stride pattern, and also quite a fast cadence. And it's not only good for that, but it's also really great if you can get up really steep hills, and there's lots of those near me, and keep that breath. You tend to get to the top without feeling really, really out of breath, and your recovery rates improve. So it's another one of those double wins. Anyway, thank you for listening. Hope they're quite useful guides, and good running. Bye.